Hey everybody. So a significant part of my neck journey was some things that I learned when I was a young man. In 1976, I was 24, and I shared shop space for a year with a brilliant guy named Robert Meadow. And Robert was a genius woodworker and had gotten very excited about making faithful copies of Renaissance lutes using, for the most part, kind of traditional methods, all handwork. Today, we don't know much about the lute. It's a tiny little niche market compared to guitars and other fretted instruments, but was part of the first group of fretted instruments. And in the 16th century in Western Europe, everybody had one and everybody learned to play them. And there were all kinds and sizes, different ones from little bitty ones you could carry around with you to some giant Theorbos that were 7 feet long and are kind of comical. So we'll show you a few pictures right now just to give you a taste for it. The body of it is very light. It's an almond-shaped body, and it's made out of a multitude of staves. Often 12 would be a pretty common number, 12 staves. And these staves would be made of very, very thin material, say about 0.5 millimeter or 20 thousandths thick when they're fully done. And then they would be edge glued. As you can see in this image, they're arrayed in a kind of a half a gourd shape. Once they're glued together, they were reinforced on the inside with either parchment or paper of some kind and hide glue. So the shell of a lute really is a composite structure, amazingly resilient and tough considering that it's so thin and just impossibly light, a very, very small amount of material. And having witnessed it for a year, again, sharing shop space with Robert while he put these crazy things together, I was completely mesmerized with how much structure you could get with such little material. It was just a revelation to me. And some more stories about lutes later on as we get into a band song. Okay, so for now, we're still talking about the neck journey, and the neck of a lute is a very interesting construction, and it's when I first learned about the veneered neck construction technique. So if we look at this little crude drawing here, we can see this is the cross-section of a lute neck. This top surface here would be the fretboard or fingerboard. And as we've discussed, I think the frets on a lute are old pieces of string that are tied around the lute neck in a loop. And it's designed to be tied just tight enough so that they'll stay where you put them, but loose enough so that you can manipulate them and tune them for position, to get them to tune up and play at the right pitch. So anyway, this is supposed to be this old string that we're wrapping around here to make a fret, and then there'd be a knot on the bass side. So of course there would be string on the back of the neck which you would be able to feel with your thumb while you were playing. So kind of an interesting way of keeping your place on the neck maybe. You'll see that the center of the neck is a vertical grain softwood of some kind, could be spruce or anything like that, a lightweight material that's stiff. And certainly the grain orientation would be vertical grain, and we know that that'll give us really good stiffness characteristics in bending. Also, it'll help to make sure that the neck doesn't expand too much in width and stress out the glue joints between the fingerboard and this veneer. This is a veneer on the back of the neck, all right? There's a fretboard here, tied on frets, And then on the back of the neck, there's another piece of hardwood veneer. Now, this was a pretty strange way to make a neck, I think you'll agree, to try and wrap this hard wood. And these were often tropical hardwoods. The Portuguese and Spanish started removing trees from Brazil and other parts of South America around 1500. So these old instrument builders or ancient instrument builders had access to some pretty exotic timbers way back when, and they were able to saw them up into thin slices and make their own veneer. And then sometimes they used them in little stripes, like I've sketched here, where each one of these would be a piece, and then in between the pieces there might be another contrasting color. You can see this type of construction on lutes and guitars of the period. In the center-ish of the lute neck, you can see this rectangle that I've drawn. And this is a representation of a reinforcing and attachment piece of hardware, which I believe was, well, I don't know when they started doing it, but certainly it was a part of the Renaissance lutes that my friend Robert was copying. And I've made a little model here of the nail. This was a spike that was made by your local blacksmith. I believe they were called Roman nails. They had a head on them. That's what made it a Roman nail. Otherwise, it was just a flat piece of material which they would forge out with a hammer and then either cut or forge to this tapered shape. And so as the nail is driven into whatever material, it is wedging and forcing its way in and making itself tighter and tighter as you drive it in. The way this was used in lute construction, here's the body of the lute. There it is laying kind of flat down on its top or belly. And then this piece of material in here is a neck block. This is the only block in the lute. There was no tail block. For the tail block, they just had an extra strip that went around, partway around to help reinforce where all the tails of these staves came together at the butt end of the lute. There was a tail strip that kind of hid those joints and covered it all up and made it stronger. There was only one block in the instrument. It was made out of some light material, maybe what they call linden or lime wood, which is a lot like what we call basswood or tilia. Here's the side view of this neck construction. It is both veneered on the front side for the playing surface and also on the back side for the purposes of hardening and also strengthening the neck. You can see that this is quite an interesting three-part structure here with two veneers on the outside faces and a softer, lighter core in the center. And this is a pretty common engineering solution anytime you need a high-performance structure that is a structure that's quite stiff, that shouldn't weigh very much. This is a pretty common way and still used today. It's called a chord structure or a veneered core. At any rate, the neck joint is right here, and you would kind of have to look at the photographs of these lutes or try and imagine in your mind's eye how the shape of the body and the shape of the neck have to be exactly the same on this diagonal butt joint here. So this is where the end of this structure was able to attach to the neck block. And when it was all done, before the peg box was put on, now peg box is just glued onto the end of this neck over here. And as you can see, it has a very steep angle. More on that later. But in order to attach the neck to the neck block, this fastener was used. And you can see that it went quite a ways up into the neck, and I would suggest that This is the first non-adjustable truss rod reinforcement structure in instrument making. And it was used way, way, way back when. Ottoman Empire, etc. Maybe 13th century or even earlier than that. I was sharing shop space with Robert Meadow when he attached his own necks to his own Lute shells, and it was a pretty exciting day. So what would happen is you would have the surface fit perfectly, hand-planed surface for this angled butt joint here, and then the neck would be glued onto the neck block so that it was all one structure. And then there would be a hole that was pre-drilled. You carefully drill a hole through the neck block right about in the middle of the neck to take this nail. The next part was really exciting, where you get this part of the nail really, really, really hot. And I'm talking about red hot, like well over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. And when it's hot, you grab it with a plier and you push it. So now the lute is upside down, no top on the lute, of course. And you can set the nail inside this hole where it immediately starts making big clouds of smoke. Very exciting day. You're holding the neck with your hand and you're pushing this in until it won't go any farther, where it still might be sticking out this far. And now you're swinging a hammer, a heavy hammer, up against this and driving it into the neck so that it joins these two parts, again, wedging and burning its way into the material. Also, I would point out that it is probably the loudest operation I've ever witnessed in instrument making. The sound that this structure made when you smash this Roman nail with a big steel hammer was really something. And you would drive it until it was some few millimeters away from being seated, and then kind of pause and sense when the right time was. And then with one mighty blow, the last blow, you'd smash it flat into the neck block so that it dented the neck block a little bit and wedged itself in for the last little bit of travel. And if you did it right, which I never witnessed it going any other way, but if you did it right, what you got was a very stiff piece of metal embedded in the neck of the instrument, serving as a very firm attachment, reinforcing that joint in a massive way, and also, to some extent, we would think, reinforcing the stiffness of the neck, particularly in this important part of the neck where it joins the body. Pretty amazing that with what we today would consider pretty primitive tools, the help of a blacksmith, we were able to get a very, very secure neck-body connection on this extremely lightweight instrument and load it up with, between, say, 16 and 28 strings, something like that. Anyway, Lute is a fascinating chapter in instrument making history. I learned a lot from studying lute construction up close, and I'm glad I did. So one of the things that it influenced in my work is it informed my neck construction. In this drawing, this of course is a cross-section of the fretboard. Here's a fret on top of that, and then this represents the vertical grain softwood in the core of the neck. And for the cores of my necks, I'm currently using Douglas fir, although I have used spruce and cedar from time to time. I prefer the fir. It is a lovely material, really fantastic sounding material. Not super light, but quite light, and very, very stiff for its weight. I love Douglas fir. I think it's underutilized in instrument making. This black mass, which you can see is thicker here in the center of the neck than it is at the edges, is carbon fiber and a very special high temperature curing epoxy resin. And then finally, the last layer of material on the outside is a piece of wooden veneer, which is bent into a curve before it's all bonded together. I'm going to show you now exactly how this works and how I prepare all these parts and stick them together to make a neck like this one.